In the shimmering world of luxury and relentless ambition, a dark secret lurks beneath every glittering facade, one that could unravel an empire built on power and pride. Hit subscribe for more enthralling tales of betrayal, redemption, and transformation. Lucas Carter, a self-made millionaire with a reputation as fierce as his success, sat behind the sleek mahogany desk in his panoramic corner office. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the opulent room that had witnessed countless triumphs and failures in his relentless pursuit of power. Today, however, Lucas wasn't thinking about mergers or market conquests. His mind was focused on his upcoming wedding to the glamorous Hollywood star, Elena Montrose. Their union was more than a celebration of love. It was a carefully orchestrated statement meant to signal that Lucas was on top of the world. As he meticulously reviewed the guest list for the evening's grand event, Lucas's eyes settled on one name that he hadn't dared to consider for years: Isabella Grant. Once, she had been his wife, a partner in both love and ambition, but their paths had diverged in a storm of passion and ambition. The thought of having her in attendance, of forcing her to witness his extraordinary success and the life she had lost, sparked a wicked delight deep within him. He decided then and there he would extend an invitation to Isabella. His assistant, knowing well the subtle art of Lucas's maneuvering, was instructed to send the invitation with an air of casual courtesy that belied its true intent. In Lucas's mind, the invitation was a tool of retribution. He imagined Isabella's reaction, the shock, the regret, and ultimately, the humiliation of realizing that even after years of separation, he had managed to build something she could never reclaim. Every detail of the wedding was planned to showcase his achievements: a lavish estate, an elite guest list, and every element designed to emphasize the stark contrast between his refined world and her modest life. Unbeknownst to him, however, this seemingly calculated act was destined to upend his meticulously constructed future in ways he could never have anticipated. Lucas leaned back in his leather chair and allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. For him, it wasn't merely about retribution. It was about proving that he was in control of every aspect of his life, even the painful history that Isabella represented. In that moment, as the office buzzed with the undercurrent of high stakes and ambition, Lucas felt invincible. But beneath that confidence lay an unseen twist, a twist that would soon unravel the fabric of his perfect world, challenging every assumption he held about love, family, and redemption. The invitation was sent, and the stage was set for an evening that would forever alter the course of both their lives. Halfway across town in a quiet, sunlit neighborhood, Isabella Grant's life had taken a very different turn. Long ago, she had relinquished the tempest of Lucas's world for a quieter existence, a life dedicated to raising her three brilliant and spirited triplets, Noah, Mason, and Liam. Isabella's days were filled with the gentle routines of motherhood, preparing breakfast, tucking her boys into bed, and instilling in them the values of honesty, kindness, and independence. Her heart, once marked by the scars of a turbulent past, had slowly healed, replaced by the deep, abiding love for her children. When the ornate wedding invitation arrived at her modest home, it stirred a torrent of memories. The invitation was elegant, an outward display of opulence that contrasted sharply with the simple life Isabella had built. For a moment, she hesitated. Attending the wedding would mean confronting a past she had long tried to forget, a past filled with broken promises and hurtful ambitions. Yet, as she read the carefully worded message, her heart pounded not with fear but with a quiet resolve. The boys, too, had begun asking questions about their father, the mysterious figure who had vanished from their lives. Their innocent curiosity chipped away at the walls Isabella had built around her heart. After a long night of reflection, Isabella made a decision that would mark the turning point of her life. Not out of a desire for revenge, but from a need to answer the questions of her children, she chose to attend the wedding. It was a decision steeped in both trepidation and hope: trepidation for the confrontation with a past she had long set aside, and hope that perhaps, in facing that past, she might finally find some closure. There was also a resolve to reclaim her own narrative. She was not defined solely by the chapters of her former life, but by the strength and love she had cultivated in the years since. In her heart, Isabella knew that stepping into Lucas's carefully orchestrated world would not be easy. The glittering facade of his life was built on cold ambition and calculated moves, and she suspected that his invitation carried ulterior motives. Yet, the thought of walking away without providing her boys with the truth about who he was and why he had vanished was a possibility she could not accept. With a measured breath, she resolved to attend the wedding. And she made a silent promise to herself: Whatever awaited her on that fateful day, she would confront it with dignity and the fierce protectiveness of a mother determined to do what was right for her children. In the days leading up to the wedding, as Isabella prepared herself for the inevitable encounter with Lucas, she began to quietly rally around the idea of not coming alone. The triplets, bright and inquisitive beyond their years, were gently prepared for the possibility of meeting the man who had once been a central part of their existence. They might not understand all the nuances of the past, but they sensed the gravity of the moment. In choosing to step back into a world she had once escaped, Isabella was not merely accepting an invitation, she was reclaiming a piece of her identity and, more importantly, laying the groundwork for the future of her children. The day of the wedding dawned with a brilliance that seemed to mirror Lucas Carter's unyielding confidence. The sprawling estate, nestled in a verdant valley on the outskirts of the city, buzzed with excitement as the elite gathered for what was touted to be the social event of the year. The grand entrance, adorned with lush floral arrangements and glittering chandeliers, set the tone for an evening of extravagance. Each guest arrived draped in designer attire, their expressions a mix of anticipation and admiration for the man whose success was the very subject of whispered conversations. Inside the vast reception hall, every detail had been meticulously curated to reflect Lucas's triumphs. The tables were laden with gourmet delicacies, the ambient music perfectly balanced to complement the gentle murmur of distinguished conversation. Elena Montrose, Lucas's radiant bride-to-be, glided through the crowd in a gown that shimmered like liquid silver. Her presence, a symbol of beauty and star-studded glamour, was meant to underscore the perfection of the union, and by extension, Lucas's own impeccable taste. Every eye was drawn to the couple, a living embodiment of success and allure. Yet, amid the orchestrated glamour, Lucas's gaze was fixed on the entrance. He stood near the grand staircase in his sharply tailored tuxedo, every muscle tensed in anticipation of the moment when Isabella Grant would make her appearance. He had envisioned this scene countless times in his mind, the grand reveal of his ex-wife, humbled by the sight of his seemingly flawless world. In his inner monologue, there was a mixture of satisfaction and cruelty, a twisted pleasure in imagining her regret and envy. Little did he suspect that the unfolding events would soon turn his carefully constructed plan on its head. At precisely the appointed hour, the doors swung open, and a hush fell over the room. Isabella entered with a quiet dignity that contrasted sharply with the glitz and bombast around her. Every step she took was measured, every gaze calm and resolute. But it wasn't just Isabella who commanded attention. Accompanying her were three young boys whose identical features mirrored Lucas's own striking countenance. The triplets, Noah, Mason, and Liam, moved in sync with an almost surreal harmony, their expressions a mix of curiosity and quiet confidence. A collective murmur rippled through the assembly as guests exchanged startled glances. The resemblance was undeniable, and for a brief moment, time seemed to slow. Elena's smile faltered, and even Lucas, who had prided himself on control, felt a jolt of something unfamiliar, a shiver of uncertainty. Isabella's eyes met his, and in that silent exchange lay a message far more potent than any spoken word. She had come not to be humiliated, but to reveal a truth that Lucas had long tried to bury. The atmosphere in the hall shifted imperceptibly. What was meant to be an evening of triumphant celebration was now tinged with the tension of secrets long concealed. As Isabella walked further into the hall, escorted by her three sons who carried an air of unspoken familiarity with Lucas's own features, the stage was set for a confrontation that would dismantle every preconceived notion of victory. Lucas's carefully choreographed world was now at the mercy of revelations that would shake the very foundations of his power. The silence that had gripped the reception hall deepened as Isabella's measured steps brought her closer to the center of attention. The ambient chatter gave way to hushed whispers as guests began to murmur among themselves. Lucas Carter felt the weight of every gaze upon him, each pair of eyes reflecting disbelief and curiosity. For a brief moment, the opulent surroundings seemed to shrink, the grandeur of the estate now overshadowed by the storm of revelation that was about to break. Isabella paused near the grand dais, where Lucas and Elena stood, one a portrait of smug confidence, and the other a vision of cultivated perfection. With a calm that belied the tension in the room, she spoke in a clear, unwavering voice that carried across the hushed crowd. "Lucas," she said softly, each syllable deliberate and measured. "I didn't come here for your vanity or to relive the past. I came here for my sons, for the truth that has been hidden away for far too long." Her words, simple yet devastating, sent ripples through the room. Lucas's eyes widened as he tried to reconcile the woman before him with the bitter memories of their shared history. His heart pounded in his chest as he realized that this confrontation was not one he could easily control or manipulate. Elena, standing beside him in her luminous gown, stiffened as if in silent protest. The carefully maintained facade of perfection was cracking, and every whisper that rippled through the crowd added to the mounting pressure. Isabella's gaze swept over the assembly, and for a moment, it was as if time had stopped. The triplets, Noah, Mason, and Liam, stood beside her, their youthful faces solemn beyond their years. They were living proof of a connection Lucas had desperately tried to sever. The irony was not lost on anyone. The very children he had once dismissed, hidden away in the shadows of his ambition, now stood as living witnesses to the life he had tried to erase. "I'm not here to remind you of your past conquests," she continued, her voice steady despite the underlying emotional weight. "I'm here to show you the consequences of a life built on neglect and cold calculation." A murmur of shock spread among the guests, and Lucas's inner resolve began to crumble. The carefully planned evening, designed to assert his dominance and humiliate a former adversary, had taken an unexpected turn. In that charged moment, the truth was laid bare before everyone. The presence of the triplets was not merely an embarrassing twist. It was an undeniable declaration that the past could not be controlled by wealth or status. Each word from Isabella was like a slow, deliberate unveiling of every secret Lucas had worked so hard to keep hidden. As the echoes of her revelation reverberated throughout the hall, Lucas felt a profound sense of dislocation. His heart, once so fiercely guarded, now pounded with a mixture of regret and disbelief. The invitation he had sent, intended as a weapon, had instead forced him to confront the consequences of a lifetime of decisions made in the pursuit of power. In that moment, amid the stunned silence and the eyes of an elite audience, Lucas realized that his perfect world was crumbling. The truth, with all its painful clarity, had emerged, and nothing would ever be the same again. In the wake of Isabella's revelation, the elegant atmosphere of the reception hall was irrevocably transformed. The scandal was no longer a whispered rumor confined to the corners of high society. It was an all-encompassing reality that spread like wildfire. Within minutes, whispers turned into heated conversations as guests exchanged incredulous looks and furtive glances. The headlines that would soon dominate every social column were already taking shape in the minds of those present. Billionaire Lucas Carter's secret triplets crash his lavish wedding. Elena Montrose, once the epitome of poised elegance, now wore an expression of icy dismay. Her carefully cultivated image, built on flawless appearances and immaculate public relations, was under siege. Standing beside Lucas, she felt the weight of every expectation crushing her. Every step she had taken toward this union was now mired in the stark, unyielding reality of Isabella's unexpected entrance and the undeniable proof that came with it. In that charged moment, Elena realized that the glamorous veneer of their relationship was nothing more than an illusion, a delicate facade threatened by the raw truth. Lucas, too, was trapped in a whirlwind of emotions. The carefully orchestrated plan to humiliate his ex had backfired, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. His heart pounded as he scanned the faces of his esteemed guests, each one a silent jury condemning his choices. The opulence that once defined his world now seemed hollow, the extravagant decor and sumptuous delicacies mere props in a drama he could no longer control. In the midst of the chaos, he felt the sting of regret, not just for the personal betrayal, but for the loss of an identity that had been intricately tied to his ambitions. As the scandal spread rapidly, Lucas could feel the eyes of the world upon him. Rumors and speculation began to circulate like wildfire on social media and in hushed conversations at exclusive gatherings. The narrative was shifting. No longer was he the untouchable titan of industry. He was now the man haunted by a past he could neither ignore nor escape. For every calculated gesture he had executed, every carefully crafted speech about success and control, there was now a harsh reminder of the human cost of his ambition. Despite the uproar, Isabella maintained her composure as she moved gracefully through the hall. She did not allow herself to be drawn into the spectacle of public scandal. Instead, her focus remained fixed on her sons, who clung to her side with quiet strength. Their presence served as a living testament to the choices that had shaped their lives, a reminder that even in the midst of disgrace, there could be resilience and hope. In that moment, Isabella's silence spoke volumes. She had not come to rekindle old conflicts, but to assert her own truth and to protect what truly mattered. Lucas watched helplessly as Elena subtly distanced herself, each step a silent message that she refused to be complicit in his humiliation. In the eyes of the elite, his carefully guarded reputation was now in tatters, and the shockwaves of the evening would resonate far beyond the confines of the estate. With each passing moment, the fallout grew, leaving Lucas to confront the harsh reality that his past had finally caught up with him, a past that refused to remain buried, no matter how deeply he had tried to hide it. In the chaotic aftermath of the revelation, Isabella Grant's departure from the grand estate was marked by a quiet dignity that spoke louder than any dramatic exit. As the scandal continued to swirl around her, she refused to be drawn into the bitter theatrics that had become Lucas Carter's downfall. Without pausing for further confrontation or engaging in the cacophony of accusations that filled the air, she gathered her triplets, Noah, Mason, and Liam, and made her way toward the exit with purposeful resolve. Every step Isabella took was measured, a silent testament to the strength and clarity of her purpose. Her departure was not a retreat born of defeat, but rather a deliberate act of reclaiming her own narrative. The glittering hallways and opulent ballrooms, which had once seemed so intimidating, now bore witness to her unyielding courage as she navigated through a crowd that had grown increasingly restless. Some guests watched in stunned silence, while others whispered speculations that would soon ripple through every echelon of society. Yet Isabella's focus was solely on her children, on protecting them from the maelstrom of gossip and ensuring that the truth of their existence would not be overshadowed by Lucas's desperate attempts to salvage his reputation. Lucas stood frozen, a figure of crumbling authority as he watched the woman who had once been his partner, his adversary, slowly disappear into the gathering dusk. In that moment, he experienced a visceral pang of regret. The meticulously planned evening, designed to demonstrate his unassailable power, was now disintegrating before his eyes. The sound of the heavy front doors closing behind Isabella was like the final punctuation in a chapter he had long hoped would remain unfinished. It marked not only the end of the evening, but also the beginning of a reckoning, a moment when every carefully hidden truth was forced into the glaring light of reality. As Isabella and her son stepped out into the cool evening air, the crisp breeze seemed to carry away the remnants of Lucas's grand illusions. The night sky, filled with stars that had witnessed the evening's dramatic turns, now stretched above them like a canvas of possibilities. For Isabella, the exit was not an act of surrender, it was an affirmation of her autonomy, a declaration that she would no longer be defined by the bitter past. The triplets, their faces reflecting a blend of curiosity and quiet determination, clung to her side as if understanding that their journey had taken a pivotal turn. Meanwhile, inside the estate, Lucas's mind was awash with conflicting emotions. The sense of panic that gripped him was foreign, a stark contrast to the unflappable self-assurance he had once possessed. The grand illusion of control was shattered, and in its place was the dawning realization that some truths, however painful, could not be erased. His perfect, meticulously planned wedding had unraveled into chaos, and now he was left to confront the enormity of the consequences. In that charged moment of isolation, the weight of lost opportunity and unhealed wounds bore down on him with relentless intensity. Lucas's eyes lingered on the exit long after Isabella had vanished from view, a silent acknowledgement that he was now facing the irrevocable loss of something he had taken for granted, a family that might have been, a future he could no longer control. The echo of her footsteps served as a constant reminder that the past had a way of resurfacing, demanding to be acknowledged. And as the night deepened around him, Lucas was left alone with the haunting realization that his carefully constructed life was on the brink of collapse. Later that night, high above the city in his luxurious penthouse, Lucas Carter found himself ensnared by a relentless loop of regret and introspection. The extravagant celebration that had once symbolized his unwavering triumph now felt like a distant, painful memory, a memory tainted by the stark reality that had unfolded before his eyes. As he sat alone in the dim glow of his private study, the vibrant energy of the evening had long faded, replaced by a crushing solitude that he had never before experienced. Lucas replayed every moment of the night in his mind, the confident stride of Isabella as she walked in, the silent defiance in her eyes, and most agonizing of all, the sight of the triplets. Each one a living testament to a past he had desperately tried to bury. The vision of his own face mirrored on their innocent features gnawed at him relentlessly. In that quiet, oppressive darkness, he was forced to confront the consequences of decisions made in the name of ambition. Each carefully plotted move, each calculated act of cruelty now seemed insignificant compared to the quiet tragedy unfolding in his heart. The solitude of the penthouse provided no refuge from the pain of realization. Lucas's mind wandered back to the countless nights spent plotting and strategizing, all in the service of building an empire that he believed would render him untouchable. But tonight, in the silent echo of his own regrets, he recognized that true power was not measured solely by wealth or success, but by the capacity for compassion, responsibility, and redemption. The absence of Isabella's forgiveness, and the knowledge that she had been raising his children without him, cut deeper than any financial loss ever could. In his isolation, Lucas acknowledged a profound emptiness, a chasm carved by years of neglecting the very essence of what it meant to be human. The meticulously constructed facade of control had crumbled, leaving him exposed to vulnerabilities he had long denied. His ambition, which once shone like a beacon of relentless drive, now felt hollow and futile. The echoes of Isabella's parting words reverberated through his mind, a stark reminder that the life he had built was inextricably linked to choices that had led him to this irrevocable moment of despair. As the hours passed, the silence of the penthouse grew oppressive, mirroring the weight of unspoken truths that he could no longer ignore. The grandeur of his achievements, once a source of pride, now seemed meaningless in the face of the love and trust he had squandered. In that moment of raw vulnerability, Lucas was forced to reckon with the undeniable reality. The past was no longer a secret to be hidden away, but a force that had irrevocably altered the course of his future. And as he stared out over the sprawling cityscape, Lucas Carter understood, with a bitter clarity, that the cost of his ambition had been his very soul. Haunted by the relentless remorse that had taken root in his heart, Lucas Carter found himself unable to let the night fade into oblivion without seeking some form of redemption, even if it was only through a single, desperate phone call. In the solitude of his study, the silence was broken only by the soft hum of the city below and the steady rhythm of his racing thoughts. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for his phone, an object that now seemed to hold the potential for a long-overdue confession, a plea for forgiveness that he was unsure he deserved. Lucas's finger hovered above the call button as he contemplated the enormity of what he was about to do. Every moment of the evening played out in his mind, the raw vulnerability in Isabella's eyes, the unyielding determination in her voice, and the silent testimony of the triplets who bore his features. With a deep, labored breath, he pressed the button and initiated the call. The phone rang, its tone echoing in the quiet room, each ring a painful reminder of the distance that now lay between the past he had tried so hard to dominate and the present he could no longer escape. For several long seconds, the call went unanswered. The ringing seemed to stretch on into an eternity, each pulse a steady beat of mounting anxiety and regret. Lucas's mind swirled with doubts. Would she even pick up? Did she expect this call? The thought of facing her voice, of confronting the raw emotions that he had so carelessly dismissed in the past, sent a shiver down his spine. Finally, the call was diverted to voicemail. In that brief, suspended moment, a calm, measured voice answered, a voice that was distant, controlled, and impossibly calm. As Lucas listened, a mix of relief and despair warred within him. The recorded message, though polite and detached, carried an undercurrent of finality. There was no immediate promise of forgiveness, no opening for dialogue, only the quiet acknowledgement that Isabella was no longer a willing participant in his world. The call ended all too quickly, leaving Lucas with a bitter aftertaste of regret and the unsettling knowledge that some wounds, once inflicted, could never fully heal. In that solitary moment, Lucas understood that a phone call could never undo the choices of the past. But perhaps it could serve as a small, tentative step toward an acknowledgement of responsibility, a fragile bridge between the man he had been and the man he now desperately needed to become. The silence that followed was both a void and an opportunity, a space in which he could begin to confront the consequences of his actions and, maybe one day, seek to mend the shattered fragments of the life he had so recklessly forsaken. Determined to find a path through the labyrinth of regret that had ensnared him, Lucas Carter resolved that a simple phone call was not enough. He had to face the woman who had become both the mirror and the judge of his past misdeeds. Over the following days, driven by a mix of desperation and an emerging desire to atone, Lucas embarked on a quiet quest to locate Isabella Grant. His search led him to a modest park, a tranquil haven far removed from the opulence of his own world, where he hoped to find her and perhaps gain a small measure of understanding. On a crisp morning, as the park's vibrant greenery provided a stark contrast to the cold corridors of his penthouse, Lucas found her sitting on a weathered bench. She was watching over her triplets, Noah, Mason, and Liam, as they played near a gently burbling fountain. The scene was simple, unadorned, and in that quiet tableau, Isabella radiated an inner strength that Lucas had long underestimated. Approaching slowly, he was met by an unmistakable air of resolve emanating from her, a determination that had clearly grown in the years since their lives had diverged. Before Lucas could speak, Noah, a bright, inquisitive child with eyes too wise for his age, stepped forward. "You're the guy from the wedding," he said matter-of-factly, crossing his arms in a manner that conveyed both defiance and caution. The boy's directness left no room for ambiguity. Lucas was no longer an abstract figure of power, but a man whose actions had deeply affected these young lives. Isabella's eyes, cool and unyielding, met Lucas's gaze as she introduced him to the children. "This is Lucas Carter," she said, deliberately avoiding any familial titles, her tone leaving no doubt about the distance she wished to maintain. For a few tense moments, the park seemed to hold its breath. The gentle rustling of leaves and the distant laughter of children provided the only soundtrack to a scene fraught with unspoken history. Lucas felt the gravity of the moment as he stood before the family he had once abandoned, a family he had tried so hard to forget. The silence between them was not empty. It was filled with the weight of lost years and the painful awareness that no grand gestures or lavish apologies could simply erase the past. In that charged encounter, Lucas realized that redemption would not be won through eloquent words or desperate pleas. It would require time, sincere effort, and a willingness to accept that the children would be the arbiters of his worthiness. The quiet park, with its modest beauty and candid simplicity, became the unlikely setting for the beginning of a tentative reconciliation. And though the path ahead was uncertain, Lucas knew that this first meeting was a small but essential step toward repairing the broken ties, a journey that would demand far more than the fleeting brilliance of wealth and power. In the weeks that followed that first, tentative meeting at the park, Lucas Carter embarked on a slow, painstaking process of trying to integrate himself into the lives of Isabella Grant's triplets. Every attempt he made to bridge the chasm between his opulent past and their humble present was met with guarded caution. Noah, Mason, and Liam, each carrying the quiet resilience of children who had learned to rely only on themselves, observed him with eyes that held equal measures of curiosity and skepticism. Lucas made every effort to be present in small, consistent ways. He started by visiting the park regularly, offering gentle smiles and tentative greetings. Over time, he joined in their simple games, sitting on the grass and listening to their animated chatter about everything from the shapes of clouds to their favorite books. Yet, despite his earnest gestures, the children remained cautious. Noah, ever the bold one, would occasionally challenge him with pointed questions, while Mason maintained a steady reserve, and Liam observed silently, his emotions hidden behind a mask of quiet vigilance. Isabella, too, watched these interactions closely. Having spent years fiercely protecting her boys from the caprices of a world that had once exploited them, she knew that trust was not given lightly. She allowed Lucas small moments of engagement, but always under the watchful eyes of both mother and children. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, the once impenetrable walls of skepticism began to show subtle cracks. Lucas learned to speak to each child in a language that was uniquely theirs, one of shared interests and honest curiosity rather than grand promises and extravagant gestures. There were moments when Lucas's attempts to connect felt almost painfully awkward, a fumbling attempt to relate to experiences that were entirely foreign to him. Yet, these missteps were not met with anger or rejection, but with a cautious understanding. The triplets, though acutely aware of the man who had once been absent from their lives, gradually allowed small flickers of acceptance to emerge. In the soft glow of early morning light or the fading hues of dusk, these quiet interactions began to weave a fragile tapestry of tentative trust. For Lucas, the process was both humbling and transformative. Every shared laugh, every moment of gentle conversation with the children chipped away at the imposing facade he had once built around himself. He realized that true fatherhood could not be bought or forced. It had to be earned, slowly and with sincerity. And while Isabella's eyes often conveyed a mix of guarded hope and lingering mistrust, Lucas could sense that, with time, the scars of the past might begin to fade. In the gentle rhythm of daily life, amid simple activities and quiet conversations, Lucas embarked on a journey of rediscovery, a journey that demanded he shed the layers of ambition and arrogance that had defined him for so long. The process was neither swift nor easy, but with each passing day, the chasm between what he had once been and what he aspired to become grew ever narrower. And in the small, honest moments of connection with Noah, Mason, and Liam, Lucas began to realize that the path to redemption was forged not by grand declarations, but by the steady, persistent efforts of a man determined to reclaim his lost humanity. As autumn's gentle chill gave way to a quieter, more reflective season, Lucas Carter found himself undergoing a profound internal transformation. The relentless pursuit of success that had once defined him now seemed secondary to the slow, deliberate process of reconnecting with the family he had long abandoned. The park visits, the shared stories, and even the occasional awkward silences had all coalesced into a shift, a subtle but unmistakable change in the fabric of his being. In the daily interactions with Noah, Mason, and Liam, Lucas began to see not the echoes of his own past ambitions but the bright, hopeful expressions of children who had yet to be burdened by the complexities of adulthood. Their small victories, a new drawing proudly displayed, a favorite story recounted with sparkling eyes, or even a moment of shared laughter over an impromptu game, became the milestones of a journey Lucas had never anticipated. For the first time, he found himself pausing not to strategize or control, but to simply listen, to understand, and to appreciate the simple joys of being present. Isabella, always the vigilant guardian of her boys, watched this transformation with a measured mix of hope and caution. She had seen the worst of Lucas in the past, a man consumed by ruthless ambition and blind to the needs of those he had left behind. Yet, in the quiet moments at the park, in the way he would carefully inquire about the boys' interests or gently join in their games without fanfare, she began to see the beginnings of a different man. The once impenetrable barrier of resentment that Isabella had built around her heart softened, if only slightly, in the light of Lucas's earnest attempts to change. The shift in Lucas was not marked by grand gestures or dramatic speeches. Instead, it was a series of small, deliberate acts, a hand offered in friendship, a sincere smile shared over a game of catch, or the quiet willingness to sit down and talk about everyday things that mattered to the children. In these moments, the true essence of fatherhood began to take root. Lucas realized that while his past was inescapable, it did not have to define his future. The quiet process of rebuilding trust was a delicate art, one that required not just time, but an honest willingness to embrace vulnerability. And so, as the days grew shorter and the light in the park took on a softer hue, Lucas's interactions evolved from cautious politeness to genuine care. The children, in their own silent way, began to reciprocate his efforts. Noah's bold questions turned into shared laughter, Mason's guarded demeanor gave way to moments of quiet understanding, and Liam, ever observant, started to express his feelings in small, tentative smiles. In this gradual, unspoken transformation, Lucas found the possibility of redemption, not through grand declarations of change, but through the slow, steady acceptance of a man who was willing to try, day by day, to be the father he had once thought he could never be. In the gentle rhythm of these shared moments, the foundation for a new future was being laid, one built on honesty, vulnerability, and the quiet determination to mend what had once been broken. And as the season of change unfolded around him, Lucas Carter realized that for the first time in his life, his ambition was no longer solely about wealth or power, but about the small, precious connections that truly defined what it meant to live and love. One cool evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Lucas Carter found himself sitting on a weathered park bench. The familiar surroundings of the park, where he had gradually rediscovered the meaning of family, seemed to whisper promises of new beginnings. The day had been long and filled with quiet, significant moments, a shared laugh with Noah, a gentle conversation with Mason, and a tender smile exchanged with Liam. In the soft, fading light, Lucas knew that the time had come for a decision that would forever alter the course of his life. Across from him, Isabella sat with the same measured calm that had defined her presence since that fateful wedding day. Her eyes, though guarded, held a flicker of hope, a silent invitation for Lucas to prove that the man he was becoming was indeed worthy of trust. The triplets played nearby, their laughter mingling with the rustling of autumn leaves. And in that moment, the quiet honesty of the scene made it clear, Lucas was at a crossroads. Noah, with a maturity beyond his years, had once asked a simple question that now echoed in Lucas's mind. Are you staying, or are you just passing through? It was a question that encapsulated everything: the lingering pain of abandonment, the yearning for stability, and the desperate need for a father's presence. Now, with the gentle murmur of the park as his witness, Lucas met the gaze of the children and then turned to Isabella, whose eyes reflected both the pain of the past and the cautious hope of the future. His voice, steady and resolute despite the turbulent emotions swirling within him, broke the silence. I'm staying, he declared, words that resonated with a newfound sincerity and commitment. In that single, simple statement lay the promise of change, a promise not to erase the past, but to forge a future defined by genuine care, accountability, and the slow, deliberate healing of old wounds. For the first time, Lucas Carter truly meant those words. They were not the echo of a calculated plan, but the heartfelt admission of a man who had learned, through pain and perseverance, what truly mattered. As the park slowly darkened around them, and the triplets' laughter faded into the gentle rhythm of the night, Isabella offered a small, tentative smile, a silent acknowledgement that the past could no longer dictate the future. In that charged moment of clarity and resolve, the choice was made. Lucas was no longer the man who had built his empire on ruthless ambition and cold calculation. He was now a man who understood that the true measure of his life was not in the wealth he had amassed, but in the connections he dared to rebuild. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but the decision was irrevocable. He would be there for the children, for Isabella, and for the possibility of a future where redemption was not a fleeting dream, but a lived reality. And so, beneath the twilight sky, with the gentle murmur of the park as their silent witness, Lucas Carter took his first true step into a new life. A life defined not by the ghosts of ambition past, but by the quiet, enduring power of love, family, and the willingness to change. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Your support means the world and helps bring more captivating stories to life. See you in the next video.